I was expecting to see another name next to mine. I think it was a pleasant surprise because I think that what you do on the school board is not always represented by how you campaign. So it was nice to be able to focus on preparing myself for the actual position rather than saying, how do I present myself in a certain way to get the votes that then become the position.
You may have had a chance to introduce yourself to voters in District 3, but tell us what you would have told them. Who is Tucker Jackson?
Sure. I am originally from Seattle, but moved here in 2017. And I am a stay-at-home dad. I do a little bit of digital marketing on the side, but I have a very diverse resume from before that. I worked in management consulting. I used to do construction. I was a goat herder for a while just to keep it interesting. And I really do think the diversity of my experiences helped me connect to a wide range of people.
You and your spouse have 2 children, fairly young age. I'm assuming they're in the Wenatchee schools?
Yep, both at Washington.
Is that the reason that you wanted to run for the school board, or were there other reasons that you wanted to get involved in this?
Mostly I did because I have, my kids are young, they're going to be involved in the district for a long time. My niece and nephew are even younger, they're in town, and I think it's important. I think it's important to participate, but I also think it's important to participate when you can affect change for people you really care about. Not that the overall valley is not important to me, but when you say, do I want to read additional information about this part of the packet that I got before the school board meeting? If your kids are impacted by that, there's a little bit extra that you want to give. And so I really do think that my interest is heightened by having kids in the district.
Is there a particular project or agenda you want to put forward in your first term? I mean, what things do you want to bring to the board and have them start to address?
Right. I think that we are going to end up with a bond and a levy during my 4-year term, and I want to do that in a way that benefits the students and is also something that works for the community, because the conditions of high school, I think, have gotten to the point where something needs to change, and I don't want that to be a huge burden on the overall community. So how do you get something that works for students and works for the community is something that I'm pretty passionate about, and I would really like to have the process, be part of the process for getting that done.
Have you been able to sit in on many of the school board's meetings and sessions, since you won election? Have you been paying a lot of attention to how the board conducts itself?
Yep, and I also have started getting the superintendent provides a weekly update to all the school board members, and so Dr. Kalahar's started sending those to Miranda and I as we get kind of caught up to say, you should be aware of what we're dealing with. And some of that is confidential, so it's not necessarily something I would be given access to even by watching the school board. So it's been nice to get caught up. It is definitely drinking from the fire hose, though. It is a phenomenal amount of information.
What do you want your role on the board to be? Do you see yourself as having a particular skill set? I mean, the physical status of the district you've spoken about. Do you feel like I'm going to be the bond guy, I'm going to be the levy and construction guy?
I, by nature, I'm kind of a peacemaker. So I would like to think of myself as part of a team and helping create a more cohesive team. So I don't want necessarily to be the bond guy. I would like to be part of the process that helps the process move more smoothly. But I think once, I haven't been in a room with work that needs to be done with the group yet, so it's hard to kind of see. I've met them all and they seem lovely. But
observing the board to this point, has it made mistakes in the past couple of years? Things that if you were on the board, you would have voted differently?
I think that coming out of the pandemic, just a lot of things were untested and uncertain, and so I will give them the grace of having to make incredibly difficult situations on the fly. And while hindsight's 20/20, and maybe I can make some changes, I know that what they were working with at the time was incredibly difficult, and I'll let them have their I'll let the history judge them, not me.
Well, they do start this upcoming set of terms with a few things on their plate. You're familiar with the state testing scores and where they put our schools right now. Do you have a way to attribute, something you attribute those lower scores to, and do you think it's a marker or an indicator of the schools actually failing?
Right. I don't think so. I think it's really hard to say that student success is determined by one specific test. I mean, I was reading a little bit more about it, and one of the things that I didn't realize was anyone who opted out of the test was considered a 0. So now you're having test impact scores impacted, which are determining like kind of the success of the district, with people who just decided they didn't want to take the test. So I think there's some of those factors that come into play that don't give a lot of the kind of the complete picture to how students are doing. Certainly, the state school superintendent hasn't said that we're failing. I don't think that a lot of people who graduate from the school would feel like they were failed. So I think we can do better, and I would like to see us do better. I don't feel like 30% on a math test is representative of the students we're putting out.
Right, and that's the thing to remember about the OSPI report cards, is it is drawn just from the state standardized testing.
Right.
The test that you take once and then turn your back on and go do something else with your school career.
Right.
And so that's where those numbers are coming from.
Right.
Do you feel like the district should have foreseen this large budget hole they've been coping with in this past couple of weeks?
Obviously, declining enrollment is an issue, and you can't do anything about birth rates. You can look at where are students going if they are moving out of the district. And I don't totally understand the COVID funds, and that it seemed like there was a mistake there that absolutely should have been managed differently.
Right, federal COVID funds that came from the federal government came to the state, parceled out to school districts, and they had an end date.
They had an end date, and we didn't budget for that end date. And so yes, that was absolutely foreseeable and was a big miss on the district's part. But some of the other things are not unforeseeable, but something you have to kind of evaluate on the fly. Enrollment's not something you can always predict.
So the district made its commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion in its strategic planning.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like that's a necessary thing? I mean, I know it's state required, but if it were not state required, if it were just suggested, where would you land on it?
I think it really is important. I think that students who feel safe, students who feel like there are people around them and that look or act like them, and people who they're reading about or seeing in the curriculum that are like them, are more likely to feel a connection to school. And I think that to improve our outcomes, certainly attendance is an issue that we haven't discussed maybe yet, but if you want people to come to school, they need to feel included. And I think that diversity, equity, inclusion is a big part of that.
Is attendance becoming an issue for Wenatchee schools?
Yeah, I think the high school's at 46% last.
Regular attendance.
Regular attendance, yeah. And overall district-wide, it's in the 60s. I'd have to relook at the OSPI data. But I think since the pandemic, you're looking at a lot of kids who said, well, I didn't have to go before. And now that we're starting to hold them to the pre-pandemic standard, which are higher standards than I think necessarily they were being held to before, it's jarring, and it's a little bit difficult to get kids to come back and change their behaviors. And I think that making sure that we are creating an environment where they do feel safe, they do feel engaged, they do feel like they're coming to school because they want to be at school as opposed to they have to go to school, is going to help some of that.
Well, this past election, you probably avoided some of this because you were again running unopposed, but it
Right.
became kind of a culture war
Mm-hmm.
election. Where do you stand on DEI? Where do you stand on transgender issues and so
Right.
forth? Is there a way that the Wenatchee schools can avoid becoming kind of a playing field in the culture wars? Because we see this kind of thing acted out in
Right.
school board meetings sometimes. Is that healthy? Is that something that the district should be partaking in?
I don't like it when it gets ugly, but certainly everyone in the valley has a voice, and I don't think anyone's voice should be any louder than anyone else's. So if someone is feeling really frustrated about not being heard or not being seen, or there's a topic or a policy that they're very passionate about, they absolutely should have a way to come to the school board meeting and say their piece. Hopefully they'll be respectful of everyone else in the room and for differing opinions. So as much as it'd be nice to say we all get along, I don't think that's always the case, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But everyone hopefully is able to be an adult about it and recognize that just because they don't share opinions, that doesn't mean the other side's a bad people.
Well, Tucker, what would you say is your best qualification to serve on the school board?
Again, as a peacemaker, and with a lot of information from different areas, I am willing to be a part of a team, and I think that this is going to be a team effort to not just get the school board to agree, but to get the community involved and have the community voices, which are all over the place, included in that decision making, so everyone feels good going forward, and the students that we're educating are able to feel included in the process, but also like they are being respected and they are being listened to, no matter kind of where they fall or where their parents fall or guardians fall.
Let's talk about those thousands of students that you have to work for on the school board. What is the duty that a school board owes to its students, specifically, those young people who are coming in and out of your doors every day?
I think they need to be seen as people, and so I want them to have a place where they feel safe. I want them to have a place where they feel they're being listened to, and I also want to make sure that they are getting some education beyond what are their test scores, because a lot of people they're not going to pursue secondary education. So all of a sudden now they're going out into the world, and how are you readying them for that next step into the bigger world? What are some life skills that you're helping them learn? Because again, I think some of this is not just a testable skill set. It's life skills that financial literacy. How do you get that into kids' world so that when they are moving out of the house, they're ready for that?